Cheers everybody, welcome back to another video, and today we're talking about detachment. Stick through to the end of the video and you'll have the tools to detach from pretty much any goal that you want. A lot of the times, the more important a goal is to us, the more that we find ourselves getting attached. And so I'm going to go over the various ways that we can practice that detachment, practice that letting go. So there's many different ways that you can think about detachment. Ironically, as many things are, see, life is full of paradoxes. And I always talk about the scale of, really, you can call it the scale of polarity, one extreme to another extreme, light, dark. With this example, we're talking about attached and not at the opposite, you could say detached. But you could also look at it with attachment theory, which applies to relationships. You have the avoidant on one hand, and then you have the anxious, the overeager attached. And in attachment theory, they talk about it as it goes for relationships. But when it comes to our goals in general, the same thing applies. Much like in a relationship, you can be extremely needy around somebody. You could be extremely needy around your goal. And so it's about cultivating this state in between, cultivating the state of neutrality. And this is really like the end game. It's almost like the final boss of getting what you want. Or manifesting, if you want to call it manifestation. I mean, a lot of people in the manifestation community call it dropping it, they call it letting go. Essentially what it is it's that you don't need it. It's the idea that you don't need this thing anymore. Again, I could use an example for relationships. You see the guy at the bar, right? That's going around, chasing the woman around, seeking for her approval. That's the neediness. That's the overly attached neediness that a lot of us feel towards our desires. And I'm not talking, it doesn't have to be a relationship. It could be amount of money. It could be a career. It could be a certain outcome that you're looking for, physique, anything. And then on the other hand, you have the guy at the bar who won't even look at her. He's just avoiding it. And they call that avoidant, right? So what you want is this place in the middle. That's where all the magic happens. You don't need it, but you would love for it to happen. When you don't need it anymore, that's when you know that you're good when it comes to this whole process of manifesting. And usually it shows up as a reflection of you already having it or not needing it. Right? The rich get richer, the poor gets poorer. The people that already have something, it's a lot easier for that to come to them. But you can also get into a space of not needing it, where you're not putting out this lack sort of vibration. You know, Neville Goddard talks about living from the end, living from the wish fulfilled. And that can work when it comes to certain goals. It can even work with your bigger goals. But a lot of the times, in my experience, if it's something that you have a lot of resistance with, if it's a goal that's big and new to you, if it's a goal that you kind of have put it on a pedestal in your mind, you've made it more important. You've exaggerated its importance. Living constantly from the end can be a tricky thing to do. And it can be difficult to live in the end in that way. So when it's a big change and out of your reality, out of your normal reality, you want to take this approach where you go for it in steps. First, it's, believing in the thing, believing that it first is knowing what you want, right? But then once you have the idea of what it is that you want, it's about believing that it's possible. You don't have to convince your mind that it will happen, counter to a lot of mainstream advice. You can know that it is possible in general and that it is also possible for you, and see it as a possibility. And we can use a more gentle approach that's like, wouldn't it be nice if this thing happened? What if this happened? And you begin to come into this state of almost dwelling in the fact that it's nice that it is possible without having to convince your mind that it absolutely is a for sure thing or that it's a foregone conclusion. Then you want to release resistance. And again, paradoxically, one way of doing this, there's a counterintuitive approach to releasing resistance that is allowing the resistance to be there. Because what you resist persists. And what you repress tends to express. So you stop the inner battle with yourself. There's this story about the Buddha and this demon Mara visiting the Buddha, and he's coming in and putting all these thoughts into his mind, thoughts of doubt, thoughts of fear, thoughts of anxiety. And it really is a story like the devil on the shoulder. And it's similar to Napoleon Hill's Outwitting the Devil. It's also analogous to the shadow. When you see, like what Carl Jung talks about with the shadow, when you continually try to ignore or repress the shadow, or maybe these negative thoughts, or this resistance, this inner resistance that comes up, you're putting your focus on it by resisting it. It's also similar to the knot technique with Neville Goddard. When you say you don't want something, it tends to appear because you're putting your focus there, you're putting your attention there. So if by just simply allowing the resistance to be there, the feelings, the negative resistance, that kind of emotional holding pattern can then pass through you. And there's techniques that you can use for this. But moving on to the next step of this, once you've kind of allowed that resistance to exist and be like, okay, even though I feel this resistance, it doesn't mean that this is an impossibility for me. Even though I feel a doubt or a fear, or even though I'm thinking fearful thoughts, this is a fearful thought. That's another thing that you can do, is just label it. Right now I'm having a fearful thought. So you're not identifying with it. Right now I'm having an anxious thought. Right now I'm feeling attached to my goal. And again, ironically, because you are saying it, because you are calling it, it's kind of like a bully. It's the same way that like a bully at school will pick on the kid who's insecure. And the more that the kid says, no, I'm not, right? For whatever he's making fun of him for. Let's say that he's making fun of him because he's got this crush on this girl or whatever. And the more that he denies it, the more that the bully picks at him. But if the kid was just like, yeah, and what about it? The bully doesn't have anything to fight with anymore. And so again, it's this paradox, what you resist persists. So moving on to the next part, right? By not needing this, because your thoughts are like bullies. That's what I want. That's one of the points that I want to get across right now, is like, you are not your thoughts. Your thoughts are this devil on the shoulder thing, if that helps you visualize it like that. They are these things that are being picked up in the ether. They're floating around, and they're not you. Every ancient tradition teaches about this. And again, it's like elucidated in these stories of the demon Mara in Buddhism, or, the devil on the shoulder in the Christian ideas, and in all of them, in Islam, in every major spiritual text and teaching, they have this same kind of understanding. So what it really, once you get past this, this part of it, which is releasing the resistance by allowing it, paradoxically, then you go to this point where you are okay with not needing it. You say that I no longer need these circumstances to be this certain way in order to feel all right, in order to move forward, in order to feel like everything's going to be fine in my life. You get to the point where you no longer need it. That's when things can begin to happen. That's when it can begin to show up. You're okay either way. I trust this can happen. I'm not going to sit around and wait for it. Because if you're waiting, you're implying that you don't have it. You're implying that you still need it. You're implying that you lack it and that it's still in the future. Trust. You trust that you're going to be okay no matter what. Regardless, I'm going to be good. I want this thing. I'd love for it to happen, but I don't need this 3D thing. I'm not making all my fulfillment and inner happiness contingent on this external thing. I want it, but I don't need it. When when you come into this space of being okay with like what you want, I would love this, it's totally possible. Yeah, the fears, the doubts, they're there, but I don't actually need this outcome or this particular thing, that I will be fine either way. That's like the main idea. That's when you enter into the state of neutrality that we talked about at the beginning. You become much more likely to get it because you're not on this frequency of lack anymore. You're emotionally independent of the 3D thing. And that is one way of defining really what, that is really a lot of the times a prerequisite to manifesting something. And you have that inner equilibrium, that emotional independence of circumstances. And that's when you become the master of your circumstances. One other way of doing this is to give this to yourself in the 4D. So you lie down, listen to music, use your imagination, and give it to yourself in your imagination. Either way, whether you go and do this and you give it to yourself and then you kind of move on about your day, or you come into this acceptance of, yeah, I'm good either way, both ways you're not putting out, again, that vibration of lack anymore. So one affirmation that you can use for this too is, I don't need this. I'm not looking for this. And I've used this for my success. It's, again, putting in that kind of like that knot technique that Neville Goddard, I will not climb the ladder, right? The famous technique. You can use that to cultivate some of this neutrality. A lot of things you can manifest fast if you do the living in the end, if they're already within your belief system, if they already seem normal to you, if they already feel normal and natural to you. But for these things that feel out of reach, for that you feel a lot of extra resistance towards, this is one way that you can do it to practice this detachment. It's another affirmation you can use is, how can I not need it and still be okay? But all of these things, they get you back into this position again where you don't have to say that you don't want this thing. You don't have to say that, you could think of it like that. That's another way that people think about it once they give up on something. You hear a lot of these success stories. Oh, once I finally gave up on it, it came. Once I stopped caring, it came. Another way of saying that, though, is once you no longer need it to feel okay, then it will come. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching. If you guys are interested in more going into a video that's more detailed on the idea of resistance and letting go of resistance, releasing resistance, let me know down in the comments and I can do a video about that. Anyways, much love as always. Drop this with a like, hit me with a subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.